In today's video, we will be taking a look at the next set of witnesses for the plaintiff, Widow Marcum. Some witnesses will testify of threats and bribes to prevent them from appearing in court. Others will testify to the actual assassination of James Marcum. A little something to keep in mind. While we are listing what everyone testified to in the Marcum trial, the very same testimonies were given in the Breathitt County trials, the Britton trials, and the Hargis trial to come. We will also cover each of the future confessions individually when they appear in the court timeline. Come along with us as we walk through the civil trial of the Widow Marcum versus the Hargis brothers, Ed Callahan, and Fulton French. All aboard the Kentucky-Tennessee Living Time Machine. Please fasten your seatbelts and keep your arms and legs inside of the vehicle at all times. But to get going, we need your help. We still need to fire up that time machine to transport us. Please help us by clicking on the like, subscribe, and bell notification buttons down below. Not only does this fire up the time machine, but it convinces YouTube that we need a bigger time machine to reach more people who love history as much as you do. Now, back to our story. Mrs. Buck Cottongame testifies. According to the Citizen, Mrs. Cottongame would testify to what she knew about the death of Marcum. Quote, Mrs. Buck Cottongame told that French saw her since she came here and told her that D.Y. Combs was here to kill her husband and Sam Fields, and that they better leave, which they did, unquote. For these threats to have been made, it seems that Fields and Cottongame knew more information about the occurrence of the shooting of Marcum, and that Hargis did not want the two men to testify. Also, the testimony of Mrs. Cottongame would set up the reasons why her husband had not appeared when called for as a witness of the plaintiff of the case. Mrs. Mahala Hord testifies. Marcum's sister, Mrs. Mahala Hord, was next to testify. Even though her testimony would be brief, it would go to the fear and intimidation that the Hargis family instilled in the community and to those that would try to oppose them. According to the same source, quote, Mrs. Mahala Hord, sister of Marcum, said that 2 years ago, Alex Hargis came to her home and cursed her and the whole Marcum family, unquote. After Mrs. Mahala Hord stepped down from the stand, Henry Noble would be brought into the courtroom to face the judge. According to the Montgomery Advertiser, quote, it was after this testimony that Rat Ankle Noble appeared in court. Rat Ankle, for whom the attachment was issued, came to court today and was turned over to an officer, unquote. This action was most likely done for the security of the witness as he testified. Also, to make sure that Noble was also kept from other witnesses so that his story could not change. And possibly to make sure that Noble would not leave until the court proceedings had finished. In a way, this action can be viewed as sequestering of the witness. He most likely was ordered not to speak to any other witness, although the newspaper made no mention of this, but it is common practice in the courtrooms. Henry Noble's testimony. According to the newspaper The Citizen, quote, in the trial of the Marcum damage case, the examination of Captain B.J. Ewan was finished Wednesday morning, and Henry Noble was called. He is a country superintendent of Thackett County and was a clerk for the Hargis brothers for 10 years. He heard of the shooting when Marcum was killed and rushed out. He saw Tom White go in a side door, fire a shot into the prostrate body, put his pistol under his coat, and walked leisurely back to the Hargis store. Witness viewed the dead body of Marcum, went back to the store, where he found White, Callahan, and James Hargis, and heard White ask what Hargis and Callahan were going to do about that money, unquote. While Noble was not in the courthouse at the time of the assassination, he did witness Tom White as he left the scene of the crime. He also was a witness to what was spoken in the Hargis store in the aftermath. He would also testify to the movements of Tom White and Curtis Jett just before the shooting took place. According to the Citizen, quote, on December 17th, John L. Noble, or Rat Ankle as he is called, was the first witness Friday morning. He saw Jet and White just before Marcum was killed. White came across the street in the direction of the back door of the courthouse. He saw White motion to Jet, and the latter follow him. Immediately after the second shot, he saw White run across the street to the Hargis Brothers store. For a few weeks previous to the killing, Jet boarded with the witness, and Alex Hargis paid his board. Marcum's residence was near, and Marcum was at home, but did not go out much. He knew that Jet carried a pistol. Witness saw several in the house with Kurt Jet. Among them was Elbert Hargis, Alex Hargis, Bill Britton, now under indictment for the killing of James Cockrell. Britton and Hargis were related. The witness was present at the consultation held at the Hargis store, in which were present B.F. French, James Hargis, Ben Golden, and James B. O'Neill, at which the location of Jet and White immediately after the killing was discussed. Witness saw Jet at one point, but Hargis insisted that he be located at another, unquote. And we have another version of the testimony as recorded. According to the Montgomery Advertiser, quote, who said that at the time of the killing of Marcum, he was in the store of Hargis Brothers and heard the shooting. He was told that his brother had been killed and hastening out saw a body of Marcum lying on the courthouse floor. He saw Tom White go in a side door, fire a pistol into the prostrate body, and then walk over to the Hargis store, unquote. These articles are not contradictory. It is often the case when covering an important trial that the newspapers would print different sections that they deem to be important to the case. While the trial transcripts themselves are not available to public viewing at this time, it would be interesting to see what Noble said on the stand in its entirety. Buck Cottongame. Now, something interesting about this character in history. The newspapers call him Buck or Ruck, and his last name is spelled either Cottongane or Cottongame. He was one of the three witnesses that was spirited away from court to prevent their testimony. Let's find out what he testified to in this court hearing. According to the Adair County News, quote, Buck Cottongane testified that French saw him in Leslie County and told him that Marcum was meddlesome and that the Hargises would have to have him killed, and that when the Hargises found people in their way, they managed to get rid of them. The conversation took place near where Nick Combs and Joe Everso, first victims of the French-Everso feud, were killed, and French told witnesses that he could get money for the same kind of work that was done at that place, unquote. This was explosive testimony. This would not only state that the death of Marcum was killing for hire, but one of the conspirators bragged about having the money to get the work done, as he did before in the French-Everso feud. It seems that if you were deemed a liability to these men, someone would be hired to take care of the problem that you were causing. The Montgomery Advertiser states, quote, over the objection of the defense, Buck Cottongame said the defendant, French, offered Moses Feltner $1,000 to leave and to take away other witnesses, and afterward Feltner did so and seemed to have plenty of money, unquote. Even though the defense did object to this testimony, it was overruled as it explained why the witnesses were taken away from the court and had to be brought back again. While the men were bribed with money to leave, we're pretty sure that they got the hint that if they did not take the money, then they would most likely be counted as potential additions to the growing list of dead men in Breathitt County. Charles Anderson's testimony. Charles Anderson would be one of a couple of people that would state that James Hargis was in an upstairs window of his store. There would be several to testify that not only Hargis was there, but Curtis Jett, William Britton, Jesse Spicer, and Tom White would also be seen as one of the three men. According to the Adair County News, quote, Charles Anderson, a student at Jackson Academy, said that he saw Marcum when killed, and that he looked up and saw James Hargis at an upstairs window of his store with a gun in his hands. Saw two others whom he could not recognize, unquote. Could it be that there were more than 3 men in the room at the time? And during the shooting, during different moments, that a different man or men would appear to look out of the said window? Or was there only 3 men in the room? Again, we will leave this up to you, our 13th juror, to decide upon. Mrs. Rebecca Bailey's testimony. In the case of Mose Feltner, he was offered a get-out-of-jail-free card if he remained silent and unfound during the trial. It seems that he was himself up on charges for the murder of Jesse Fields. This most likely seemed like a fair deal to Feltner, as he had been brought into court through the capture of the sheriff. According to the Adair County News, quote, Mrs. Rebecca Bailey, mother of Mose Feltner, at different times said that she saw Callahan and French, and each wanted Mose Feltner to help them, and they would help him out of the trial for murder of Jesse Fields. As an argument, French said that the Hargises were all powerful in Breathitt County, and that the circuit judge would do as much as they said, that Governor Beckham was their friend and would do what they wished, unquote. Not only did Bailey testify that her son was given the opportunity not to face trial, but she would also testify that because of political connections that the Hargis family had, that it was better not to cross their path or go against anything that they wanted. Testimony of others for the plaintiff. According to the newspaper The Citizen, quote, Hezekiah Combs of Morgan County saw the dead body of Marcum and described the location and nature of the wounds. John Bays, a Cincinnati commercial traveler, was a clerk in the store of the Hargis brothers at the time of the killing. He testified to the location of James Hargis and Tom White at the time and immediately after. He knew that James Hargis and Marcum were not friendly. Kelly Cash heard a conversation between Jet, White, and Mrs. Mary Johnston shortly after the killing, but he was not allowed to tell the nature of it, unquote. At this point, the jury was sent out as the plaintiffs in the case wanted to prove that Alex Hargis was very upset by Cash. This was due to the fact that Cash was an attorney that wrote out a power of attorney for Henry Hurst. This was for a bond for Mose Feltner, who was under indictment for murder. Judge Benton would rule that this testimony could not be included into the case, and that any further evidence of a conspiracy should be done by the testimony of D.D. Hurst. According to the Citizen, in a later article, we get more of a complete picture of what D.D. Hurst would testify to. Quote, D.D. Hurst, father of Mrs. Marcum and postmaster of Jackson, saw Marcum as he laid on the courthouse floor, but the sight made him sick and he went out. He met Kurt Jedd at the door, and the latter said that the murder of Marcum could not be ascribed to him. For quite a while before his death, Marcum seldom went out without his child in his arm, or his wife, or his sister by his side. Before Marcum's death, Alex Hargis told the witness that Marcum had made a public charge against him, which he must publicly retract, unquote. So with this statement, we now have a motive behind why Marcum was in fact marked for death in the eyes of Alex Hargis. We still have more testimonies to come and confessions for this trial. Again, as the 13th juror, make up your own mind if these witnesses should carry weight in the case, and whether or not the final verdict was a just one. Thank you. We at Kentucky Tennessee Living would like to thank you for watching our video series on the Appalachian feuds. Don't forget to hit that like button, as the more likes we receive, the more likely YouTube is to suggest our videos to other viewers. Also, to receive notice when we upload a new video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell for notifications. We thank you for continuing to support Kentucky Tennessee Living as we are discovering the mysteries in Appalachian history.